Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Start Your Día Right, celebrating El Día de los Niños, El Día de los Libros at your library. I am Christine McNew, Youth Services Consultant for the Texas State Library, and I am your moderator. I'd like to thank Naomi DiTullio for taking care of the technical aspects of the webinar. Now, during the webinar, please remember to type your questions in the question pane, and Jeanette will answer them at the end. Now, our presenter today I'd like to introduce is Jeanette Larson. Jeanette was raised in a military family, and her upbringing included a lot of diversity. She lived in Germany and Japan, as well as in several different parts of the U.S. She earned a bachelor's degree in anthropology from the University of New Mexico and thoroughly enjoyed learning about many of the world's rich cultures. Jeanette has worked for several different libraries in California and Texas. Now semi-retired, she lives in Rockport, Texas, where she enjoys birdwatching, walking the beaches, writing, and reading. Her newest book, Children's Services Today, A Practical Guide for Librarians, will be published next month by Roman and Littlefield. Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Christine. It's good to be with everybody, and it's good to see so many familiar names, but also some new people that I probably have not met. If you're in Texas, there's a good chance I'll be stopping by as I come to do some bird watching. I was in McAllen last month doing some bird watching. Just a reminder that we will be archiving this webinar, so if you missed something, you can go back and re-listen. Also, you should have received a link for the handouts. If not, you can download them later. And all of the titles and URLs and things like that are in there so that you can spend your time listening and thinking about the great ways that you're going to do some DIA programming rather than trying to copy down URLs. I wanted to start with a little bit of, Christine said I was raised in a very diverse way because we were in the military and we've lived in a lot of places. I always sort of said that my background was Heinz 57. Apparently my ancestors liked a lot of people because my background is primarily European majority, but a lot of other cultures mixed in. And we are products of our cultural upbringing and of our life experiences. I put up this little picture of myself when I was about maybe 16 months old to remind us that a lot of us who work in libraries were raised in environments and cultures that valued books and reading, and we were surrounded by books. So even though many of us have diverse backgrounds, we need to keep in mind that not everybody was raised in that kind of culture. A lot of children today don't have books, and libraries, as librarians, I feel very strongly that we have a responsibility to help those kids become literate members of our society. The DIA activities work to improve literacy while also celebrating those cultures and all of the various languages in our community. I wanted to just point out, I've been involved with DIA since the very beginning. Right after Pat Mora decided on this idea and came up with it, she got help from a couple of people, including Auralia Garza de Cortez and members of Reforma. And then she said something to me, and I said, okay, let's do some stuff. So in addition to having written the book that those of you who are in Texas Public Libraries will get, I also served on the Texas Library Association's DIA committee. I incorporate a lot of DIA material into the youth programs class that I teach at Texas Women's University. I've been a judge for the Mora Award, which honors and recognizes programs in libraries. And I was very honored in 2010 that Pat Mora named me a DIA Dynamo. I'm not going to be repeating everything from the webinar that was held 2 weeks ago and which is archived if you did miss it, but I did want to ask how many of you went to the webinar, attended the webinar 2 weeks ago where Pat Mora and Mark Smith talked about the background of DIA. So go ahead and do the poll. And it's looking like about half and half. And again, Naomi is going to give you a link at the end of today's session that is the archived version of that webinar, and it was really a lot of fun to hear Pat Mora talk about the inspiration for Dia and how she got it going and some of her concerns and some of her things that she's looking forward to with Dia. So it looks like almost everybody has voted, and right now we're at 47% yes and 53% no. So that's a really good mix. So I'm not going to go over everything again, but in that presentation, Pat and Mark talked a little bit about what Dia is. It's a national initiative, and the thing that distinguishes this from some other initiatives in literacy is that Dia emphasizes the importance of literacy for children from all backgrounds. And one of the things that Pat struggles with is that because it is in Spanish, a lot of times we assume that what we're talking about is just Spanish language, but in fact it's all languages and all cultures. The other thing is that it's a daily commitment that we take. We want to link children and their families to diverse books, languages, and cultures. And all of this culminates with a celebration around April 30th, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But this April 30th was selected because it is the Day of the Child in many countries. Dia is still growing. Some of you I know have participated in Dia over the past years, but according to the registrations on the Dia website that's maintained by the Association for Library Services to Children at ALA, Texas is trailing behind California and Washington and many other states for Dia programs. And that may be, I hope that just some of you have not submitted your information to ALSC, and we'll talk a little bit later about why that's important for you to do. But we also know that a lot of people just aren't doing Dia. So today I'm going to be sharing some information about this program. I'm going to talk to you about how the program is evolving and also provide some ideas for programs that you can do in your library. My goal is to help you attain the confidence to try this multilingual, multicultural programming in your own library. And Pat Mora talks about how we have Mother's Day and Father's Day, but we don't always celebrate children. And I think that having Dia in April, which is then followed in May by Mother's Day and in June by Father's Day, is a great way to really recognize the kids that we work with and try to do so much for. There are thousands of libraries across the country, school and public libraries, that celebrate literacy through Dia programs, and bilingual literacy specifically. 3 states throughout the years have been the bright lights in advocating for literacy in every language. Texas, Florida, and California have supported Dia from the beginning and are often referred to by Pat Mora as Dia states. But because we've been lagging a little bit, and when ALSC did some surveying, they discovered that a third of the libraries were unaware of Dia, and another third were familiar with it but doing no Dia programming. The State Library and Archives Commission has committed to making Dia a priority in 2015. We really would like to see more stuff being done in Texas, and so that's one of the reasons for the 2 webinars that are being hosted by the State Library. Dia's mission from the beginning places an emphasis on all cultures and the plurality of our nation. Its mission is to spread book joy, which is a word that Pat Mora coined, every day by linking children from all of their cultures with books and then celebrating together on or around April 30th so that libraries all over the country are doing something on that day. Pat Mora reminded us in her session that literacy is still one of the big dividers in our country, more so than even technology. Children who, and young people who have cell phones don't have books in their homes. They're not reading every day. And so one of the major goals for Dia is to honor children and these cultures, as well as to foster literacy and promote the library collections and programs that we have that are really looking at the diversity in the United States. I'm not going to read you all of the history of Dia, but just to kind of refresh for those who don't know. Children's Day started in 1925, and there were some little starts and fits and things like that that happened with some countries, but it has become a tradition in Mexico as well as in many other countries, not just in Latin America. There are some different dates. One of the reasons that Pat Mora chose April is that it's also National Poetry Month, and she is a poet. So in 1996, she decided that maybe we needed to have a holiday that recognized kids, a celebration that added books and literacy. The State Library was involved in this from the very beginning in 1998. We produced the first library booklet at the State Library in Texas, and it is still available, and I have a link for you on one of the last slides that can take you to that. A lot of the material is still very, very relevant. Texas is was extremely involved. Austin Public Library won the first Mora Award. El Paso won the second. We haven't really done as well with those awards since then. It moved to the Association for Library Services to Children as a permanent home in 2004. And 2016, next year, will be the 20th anniversary. We know that language and culture is important. DIA is important, and the emphasis that we place on DIA activities is important because it's part of acquiring language. Research has shown that children who participate in some of these diverse literacy activities at home, in school, in the community, in libraries, they are going to be more successful readers. There are 68,000 languages in the world, and a child is born. When the child is born, their brain doesn't know which language it's going to need to learn. So they need opportunities to use and hear different languages and to say words in different languages. It's so much easier when it's children are learning this. Our ability to learn language is most adept until we're in about 4th grade or so, although some of us continue to be really good at that. I took German and Spanish, for example. We lived in Germany for a while, so I learned to speak while we were there. Took Spanish in college, but I started late, and it still is a struggle for me. On the other hand, my husband grew up in a Spanish-speaking area, even though his last name is Larson. And while he is not fluent, he does better with languages than I do. And whenever we travel, he's always trying to learn some basic phrases and things in that language so that we adapt a little bit more to the countries that we're visiting and that we feel more a part of that culture. The bilingual brain focuses attention on what's important in what they're hearing and ignores the distractions. Research has shown that it's a more efficient brain, it's more nimble. There's a lot more flexibility in thinking, and you have a better ear for listening, so you have a greater sensitivity to language when you're speaking and hearing multiple languages. It also allows us to communicate with people we might not otherwise know. And important for those of us as we get older, being bilingual and hearing different languages helps to reduce the cognitive decline. An active brain is a healthier brain. So the major focus of DIA is on celebrating languages and encouraging acquisition and retention of more than one language. We do speak a lot of languages in the world, but also in our country. In the U.S., worldwide rather, 5% of the world speaks English as the primary language. So English is really a very minority language. Familiarity with languages increases cultural understanding. But less than 10% of Americans are fluent in any language other than English, compared to over 50% of Europeans. I did visit a friend we knew when I lived in Germany some years back, and we were talking about that very thing. And I did point out to him that he worked for a railroad, so he was going between Germany and France and Spain and other countries regularly, where we don't always have those opportunities, but we can make them a little bit more opportunities in our libraries, because even a little knowledge of and appreciation for another language can break down barriers and increase opportunities for friendship. And while many Americans are fluent in English, they may also speak another language at home. The map on the right side of the screen shows where Korean is spoken in the U.S., while the left side screen of the screen shows a map of languages that are prevalent in the Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana area other than English or Spanish. And you can see that even within Texas, which has a lot of Spanish speakers, we also have a lot of areas of other languages. And you look at Louisiana, and it's quite understandable. French is one of the major languages spoken there in addition to English and Spanish. And also more and more parents want their children to learn another language, or at least to be comfortable with the language of their culture, their country, of their family origins. Whenever we talk about doing multicultural programming, multilingual programming, it always comes up that I don't speak, fill in whatever language it is that you want. And so one of the ways to look at that is to first of all recognize that culture and diversity is more than just the language. And while we may be reluctant, we don't speak Spanish in California and Texas and other states, it's also not as foreign as some other language may seem. We have many words in our own culture and in the American culture that reflect those languages. And a lot of people are eager to share their language and their culture. So we can incorporate books by authors and illustrators from that culture. We can incorporate books that positively feature characters from other cultures. You can use some books that have a few words from the language. We'll be looking at some other ways that you can use bilingual books and read the English while pointing out that the text in another language is included, or incorporating, having a simultaneous reader helping you, and using songs and other tandem kinds of programming that bring that bilingual element into your programs. So why start DIA? You've got plenty to do already. Why should you be doing this too? DIA is multilingual, multicultural, and it's celebrating the heritage of our community members, but it's also about just the beauty of language and words. Kids love to play with words, and it's great for them to be able to play with the words that are from a different language and be learning those. Multicultural programming is also important as a way for us to reach new members of our community. But it's also important for members of the predominant culture to see and hear what's happening from other cultures around us. So while much of DIA does focus on Spanish speakers, every community has a lot more diversity than you might first imagine. Go back and look at the maps and see what languages are being spoken, or what languages were important. In a lot of Texas communities, you know, we have a lot of rich German and Czechoslovakian and other languages coming into our from our history. A couple of things that are just up here as reminders. You know, it's like being bilingual is like adding more RAM to your hard drive. You just can do so much more. And it supports that academic achievement that is so important within our communities and for our kids. So we all have cultural and linguistic heritage that you can include in your own programming. And what we're asking you is that you start to make DIA a regular part of your programming. Included in regularly observed literacy promotion events that we're already doing, like Children's Book Week, Teen Read Week, Drop Everything and Read Day, Dr. Seuss Day. Also look at ways to move the programming beyond the library community and incorporate other kinds of literacy into the DIA programming that you're doing. Try to reach beyond the Latino community to other cultures and languages that are important. And one of the things that I really like to do when I'm working with libraries is look at how you can brand other cultural programs as part of your DIA celebration, so that when you have a holiday, you're making it a DIA event. You're labeling it or branding it as a DIA event, so that, and other kinds of community events, so that you're not having to start over with everything that you're doing. We talked about the fact that DIA is generally recognized on April 30th, but that we also want it to be year-round activities. You have a lot of flexibility to make it what you need it to be. You're in control. You can decide what dates work for you and how often you're going to emphasize DIA. If you're some of the schools had said they prefer the Dia de los Jóvenes, which is Youth Day, Book Day, because the middle graders don't like to be called kids. So that's fine. You can change that to fit your needs. You can incorporate it into other celebrations and have a book fiesta. I've posted a couple of other bilingual or multicultural events on here. Surya Festival is an Indian festival. Many of us have huge Indian populations in our communities. But try to celebrate throughout the year with some kind of an event that culminates around April 30th. And for some libraries, April 30th just isn't going to work because when it falls on a weekend or it falls during the school week. So you can move it a few days to have something that really spotlights the multicultural aspects of your community. Whatever you decide is going to work right for you, if you're not already doing DIA program, just get started. Start with one program or event. Get it going and keep it going so that it becomes part of your regular calendar and the cycle of your programming. We want to see that the community expects DIA programming as much as they expect summer reading program, story time, or other activities. And in fact, one thing that's very popular with a lot of libraries is that they'll actually use April 30th as the kickoff for promoting summer reading program. Now I mentioned that Texas Public Libraries will be getting a copy of this book. I just wanted to give you an idea of what's in the book so that you know that there's more than what we can present in the time that we have together today. We can't possibly cover all the topics adequately. But in addition to more about what DIA is and the cultural competencies that you're reinforcing with DIA, there's information about reaching out to the community and partnerships. There are lots of programming ideas for public libraries as well as for school libraries. There are some best practices, and there are lots more resources than we can share with you today. So to start your DIA right, know what you want to do. That's common sense, although a lot of times we sort of fall into doing something. But think about what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. You're going to need to do the same kind of program planning that you do for any other program. Start early if it's going to be a major program, but obviously you don't need as much planning time if you're going to do a single DIA story time. Bigger programs are going to require more planning. You also need to be sure that you have your administrative support. Not every administration is supportive of bilingual programming and multicultural programming, so make sure you've got your boss and your boss's boss on your side. Think about who you might be able to partner with, and also look at what kind of community involvement you can have. And we'll talk in a few minutes about some of the different potential partners for you and involvement that you can have for the community. I like to keep notes. Sometimes I can't use an idea this year, but I want to save it. I also like to keep notes of things that maybe didn't go quite as well as I thought it would, and how I might tweak it for the next time. Don't feel like you have to jump into DIA with a huge, big April 30th all-day program. You can start small and build up, and actually that works very well because you're slowly progressing and you're able to adjust and make some adjustments and tweak things that don't quite work the way you thought they were going to. And please ask for help. Involve the community, because you don't necessarily know everything about a culture, even if you're actually part of that culture. Whoever it is that you're trying to reach, we want to try to involve them in the planning so that you get it as close to right as possible. Also, one of the things that I didn't mention at the beginning, but you have my email address. The State Library, Christine McNew is the Youth Services Consultant for the State Library. She's available to help you with ideas or figuring out why something maybe didn't go the way you thought. I'm also always available. So what kinds of celebrations? These celebrations can take place in schools, libraries, church basements, fairgrounds. A number of communities have started doing things because they were inspired by the library. They're doing bigger things in the community. All kinds of different activities. These programs can be single events. They can be multi-day. They can, we hope that they involve books and kids. A lot of libraries have done book fairs and book giveaways and things like that, and really get people thinking about how these celebrations not only connect kids with books, but they also connect cultures. Another question that comes up frequently is, what do we mean by diversity? And diversity, simply put, is the points of differences that we have. Language, culture, ethnicity, heritage, education, age, economic status, all of those can be points of differences that are diversity. In DIA, which somebody, I think it was in Florida, or maybe North Carolina, I don't remember off the top of my head, decided that DIA equals diversity in action. DIA is focusing primarily on those 4 parts of diversity: language, culture, ethnicity, and heritage. Even many of our communities have large groups of Asian language speakers, but also more and more we're seeing different European languages. And again, even if the language is not the primary language spoken at home or in the ethnic or cultural community, it is probably the language of the family's heritage, and therefore it's going to be important to them. This is fairly recent. We've had a lot of conversation going on over the past 6 months about diversity and diversity in books. And while Dia is talking a lot about programming, we also need the books that support that diversity. And so there's a campaign going called We Need Diverse Books. And I like their campaign site because it's got a lot of resources for you if you need to find books from other cultures. And one of the things I really like is on the right-hand side of the screen that the link between a book from the majority culture to some books or books from the minority cultures. They link the mainstream book with a diverse book. And this allows us to bridge from the majority culture to the other cultures and show our similarities as well as our unique qualities. So do take time to check out that page. Also, as you're looking for books, one of the major reasons for the We Need Diverse Books campaign is to remind us of the importance of seeking out those multicultural and multilingual books. And they can be a real challenge to find. Many of them are published by some of the smaller publishing houses that just cannot do the kind of advertising that the larger companies can do. The book on the left, The Charro Clause, is from Cinco Punto Press, which is actually based in El Paso, and the author, Javier Garza, is a Texas author and illustrator, so like to make sure people are aware of his books. The other book on the right, Dale, 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 is by Rene Saldana Jr., and it's Carolyn Flores is the illustrator, and again, both of them are Texans, and their book was published by Arte Publico, which is housed at the University of Houston in Houston. But also we have Lee and Lowe, which does a lot of great multicultural and diverse books, Groundwood, many others, and in the book there is a list of many of those publishers. So seek them out. Very few of us have time to take on anything new or more. Something's got to be given up if we're adding something new. But you're going to be doing something, so look for ways that you can add DIA and diversity and community languages to the programs that you're already doing. When you can start something new, try to make it a DIA event. So you can add DIA to your preschool story times, your holiday celebrations, the various things. We can have world languages programs, we can have cultural programs, we can celebrate holidays from other countries, and include multilingual components into a lot of what we're doing. If you are going to do some Spanish bilingual or whatever language bilingual story time, it can be a one-time event if it's new for your community. Remember that 25% of the U.S. children are Hispanic, and Latino and non-Latino parents want their children to learn Spanish. When you're doing that, use simpler books if you're not fluent in the language. Counting books and colors and food and clothes and concepts are usually a little bit easier for non-fluent speakers to learn. You're learning a few words. The Build a Burrito book is a counting book in English and Spanish that was illustrated by David Diaz, and it's a lot of fun. It's actually shaped round like you see it on the screen. There are also books that are available in both English and Spanish. So if you don't feel comfortable enough reading the book in Spanish, go ahead and read it in English, but then display the book in Spanish and point out that you've got it in that other language. And select books that were written and or illustrated by members of that community, even if the book is not especially bilingual or culturally diverse. It's easier to learn words when you use music. Okay, I want everybody, I have a little song down at the bottom of the page. Sit there at your computer and sing along with me. Buenas noches, ¿cómo está? Muy bien, gracias, y usted. Y'all sounded fabulous. We can learn, even those of us who are not very fluent in any language other than English, can learn some simple songs. You can print out the rhymes that you're doing so that you're reading it along rather than having to try to memorize it in whatever that language is. And use flannel boards. Mouse tails is a great one to tell with flannel boards. And it's okay to take off a color if you just cannot know that word in the other language. Or if there are speakers of that language in the audience, ask for their help. Say, okay, help me along. What is this color? So that they're saying it in the other language instead of you having to. A really great book for finding some of these songs and rhymes in Spanish and English is the book Read Me a Rhyme in Spanish and English by Rose Trevino. Also, you can take some media help. There are a lot of movies and clips many of them done professionally by other organizations that are working with bilingual kids that you can find on YouTube, or show something on a DVD, or play the music on an audio CD. Storyblocks organization is a really great resource because they've got a lot of videos that have a lot of these songs. And I like to use puppets because if the puppet makes a mistake, it's funny. And the puppet can ask the audience to help with the languages that they don't understand. There are tons and tons of scripts available online as well as in books like Read Me a Rhyme that can help you find things that you will be able to use in your programs. Another example of a world language story time, this is focusing on Italian. You can use a book like a song like Pio Pio, which is a traditional Italian nursery rhyme that's included in the Dia book. A book like Pizza for the Queen. It's supposedly based on a true story about how the Italian flag got its colors. And then you can do a little craft. Two of my favorite sites, Infancia.com is an Italian site that has some traditional nursery rhymes and things that you would use with preschool story time. And then MamaLisa.com has, you pick what country you want, and there are compilations of songs and rhymes, and sometimes they actually even have a little video or an audio file to play that. So again, it's a nice resource when you don't feel comfortable singing yourself or trying to translate. Talk Story was a joint project and is still a joint project, but it was started by ALA President Camelia Allaire as part of her Family Literacy Initiative. I like this because it offers a lot of ideas for cultural story times. They also ask that you continue to share your successes, but they go into a lot of the Asian, Native American. It's a joint project with some of those other cultural associations in the library. One of the most interesting ideas that I heard was from a library in Kentucky where they used large format books that had very, very brief text and lots of good pictures, big bold pictures, and that were available in multiple languages, not just English and Spanish. And then they provided the books to the participants in advance, and each, you can see the lady in the picture is wearing a sign that says Tagalog. Each participant was a community member who would read the book in their language. And this works best with very short books with not a lot of text. Usually they'll read the English first, but also a lot of the stories told by the pictures. So when the person is reading, the kids are hearing it in the multiple languages, and they read it really simultaneous is not the right word, it's more like sequentially. They'll read the first page in English, the first page in Tagalog, the first page in Spanish, the first page in Italian, whatever, and then they go to the second page. Splash by Flora McDonald is one of the books that is available in multiple languages. There are also books by like Farmer Duck, and a lot of books by Brian Wildsmith have been put into more than 2 or 3 languages. Language Lizard is one of the resources I like for finding those books. You can see here on the screen, Farmer Duck is available in at least 12 languages, Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Hindu, Italian, Korean, I forget what some of the Vietnamese. And you can actually, if you look over on the left-hand side under the Browse Search By, you can actually search by language to find some of the materials that you're needing for your programs. Starbright Books is another company that does a lot of books in multiple languages. Brian Wildsmith's Animal Colors that you see over on the left-hand side of the screen is available in Navajo. His book Farm Animals is available in Tagalog, and again they have a lot of different books that you can use in your programming when you want things, and these are books that you're going to be familiar with, so again it's often a little bit easier to learn the language of another book when you're already familiar with the story. Another really easy kind of multicultural programming that you can do is hold something for storytelling. World Storytelling Day is March 20th, and oral storytelling can be a part of any program. In many areas of our country and many communities, you can find professional tellers who can tell tales that either include words in other languages or they are from the culture that you're highlighting that day in that program. There are also some really great collections. We have Diana de las Casas' book, Tales from the 7,000 Islands, which has Filipino folk tales. You have Storytelling Across Language Barriers in Tell the World by Margaret Reed McDonald, and Read Aloud Stories from Around the World that bring some of the language and culture into your storytelling program. Silly and Sillier Stories is a collection of 20 tales that are retold by Judy Sierra. Diana de las Casas' books offers insights into the people and culture of the Philippines through dozens of tales that represent the nation's various islands and the many different cultural ethnic groups that are part of that community. Many of the stories also include words in the native languages, as well as games, crafts, and recipes. So Tell the World is it also gives you some storytelling techniques for when you're working with languages that you're not totally comfortable with, and includes some sample stories with the pronunciation guides. So these are all great for adding to your collection and your repertoire of programming. Fairy tales are universal, and many of the fairy tales are found in different variations in different cultures, so these can easily be incorporated into your DIA program. Using fairy tales to show the different versions of the same story, and oftentimes those tales do include part of the language of the story's origins. Mel's desk, Melissa Depper is actually a librarian. I think she's still in the Denver area. And her blog includes some great ideas for multicultural programming. She developed a mix and match Cinderella story to go with Summer Reading Club theme a few years back, One World, Many Stories. And it was based on the book Glass Slipper, Gold Sandal by Paul Fleischman. So she mixed a flannel board, created a flannel board set that allows the kids to mix and match a familiar story, and yet you see all of the different characteristics and elements from the different cultures. So that once upon a time in Mexico, in Ireland, in Zimbabwe, there lived a girl who worked all day in the rice fields, then spent the night by the hearth, sleeping among the cinders. There are also many, many different picture books versions of some of the stories like Cinderella. Domitilla is a Mexican version, and that's just one of several that are available. The Golden Sandal is an Iraqi version known in Arabic as the Red Fish and the Clog of Gold. So you can really incorporate a lot of that into your DIA programming. If you do a storytelling series, I like to put up a large world map on the bulletin board or on the wall in your program room, and use that to pinpoint the locations for the stories presented in your story time and into your programs. Emphasize words in the language in the story that are in the language or that reflect the language of the culture spotlighted. Several libraries have also done this type of program where they encourage families to share stories that they remember from their own childhood. And we, many of us have great stories that reflect the culture of our childhood. And in most communities, there are people from the culture who are very, very willing to work with you. A couple of online resources, or one online resource. This is Story Cove, which is online, so you can also project it. Show some of the stories that are from different cultures. You can check out the sample program. It is a subscription series, but it's not very expensive. But even if you don't subscribe to it, you can look at this site for inspiration for some different stories that are available, especially when you're looking for some of those that are the same story in multiple cultures. One comment that Pat Mora made that I think is worth repeating is that we want to keep books and literacy in our programs. Even if you're doing a magic program, show magic books. And there are magicians that are bilingual and will do the program in both English and Spanish. But always be showing some books. Add books that include other languages and activities to your after-school programming or your special programming or your summer programming. This is one idea, gardening. Community gardens are really big right now. It's a big topic. Invite someone from a community garden project to show how a small garden can be added to almost any home. Display the gardening tools, and maybe if you can, give away seed packets for non-typical foods. This one was put together to be totally multicultural. You have The Ugly Vegetables by Grace Lynn. You have the Giant Carrot by, the Carrot Seed by Ruth Krauss, which is in Spanish. And you could have demonstrations of food from different cultures. The craft that went with this one was making Hershey Kisses rosebuds, always popular. And chocolate is extremely multicultural. Instead of, or in addition to the traditional holidays that we often have programming for, like Christmas, feature some holidays from other countries. This is a great way to encourage that segment of the community to come into the library. Holi is a Hindu celebration of spring. The kids love this, not necessarily that you're going to do it inside the public library, but as part of it, people throw colored paints at each other. My nephew, who's going to school in St. Louis, posted pictures of him and his friends doing this. The library can focus on using crepe paper to throw colors at each other instead of actual paints. But there are a lot of books that go along with this, and in addition to reading, one of them and maybe having some dancers, you could serve some mango lassi and some Indian food to round out that program. Big celebrations, things outside of your sort of ongoing story time after school that you can also do for Dia may include big celebrations that are an all-day event or a multi-day event. These obviously require a lot more planning, and you want to involve more partners, the media, schools, other organizations that work with children. The big thing with doing these kinds, in addition to starting early, and really doing some planning, is to also delegate work and double check everything that you're doing so that things go smoothly. The picture here is from Farmington, New Mexico, and they set up, I thought it was really clever, they do parking lot tailgate party for Dia, and they invite all of these other organizations from the community that work with kids, and so those organizations are really doing the content. You know, they're displaying things, they have crafts for the kids, they have little activities that the kids can do as they go from car to car or truck to truck tailgating. And that's a great way, I think, to relieve some of the burden on yourself. You're still having to do all the planning and the double checking and making sure things are going to run smoothly, but these other organizations are really taking care of what's happening during the day. Incorporating Dia into other celebrations. Chase's calendar of events is online. Also, South Carolina has a day-by-day literacy calendar that's online for free, and you can see what's going on. One of the things that I really like on Chase's is this Around Your World feature that they have on there, where you can look and see what kind of things are happening in different countries on different days, so that you can see that there's a Russian language celebration in June, and there's a tomato festival in Italy. Wouldn't that be kind of fun to do as a library program, something with tomatoes? Universal foods. I mean, some of these foods are in almost every culture. You can do author birthdays. Pat Mara's birthday is the 19th of January. Incorporate your Dia programming with other holidays. I thought it would be a lot of fun to do for April Fool's Day. You could use jokes from different cultures. We learn a lot about other cultures by what makes us laugh. Mother Language Day is in February. Read Aloud Day is in March. There's an International Literacy Day in September. Or look at the month-long celebrations. What can we do for Poetry Month that incorporates other languages? And again, there's lots and lots of books that show poetry in the various languages. And music. Research has shown over and over that we learn faster when we sing. We learn better when we can sing the words. So that's a great way to include different languages. Children's Book Week. Usually Children's Book Week is emphasizing books from all of the countries. It's international. It's an international celebration, so it's a good opportunity for you to emphasize books from the different countries represented in your community. If the national theme isn't working perfectly, modify it. And again, it's a great connection between Dia and Summer Reading Club because one leads into the other. So it's a good way to you know, kind of connect all of those different celebrations that we do of books. You can create puzzle and activity sheets that incorporate multiple languages. Think about having a word search with country names or the titles of books in various languages. And there are those word search programs available online for free that help you to make up those activity sheets. Also, some of the websites that we've mentioned and that are in our resources will also give you some activity sheets and things that are in other languages. Another online resource that I like to incorporate in Dia programming is the International Children's Digital Library. This project includes licensed copies, so they're legit, of books from around the world that have been contributed by authors, illustrators, and publishers in order to share the world's language and literature with kids. It also is a good selection tool if you need to add copies to your physical library. And you can see that there's a lot of different material here. And some of it's in English, but a lot of it is in other languages. They're from different cultures. This next slide that I have actually shows one of the books. This is how it looks on screen. This is actually a book that is in a Mongolian language, and it's a story about how two sisters spend their vacation in the countryside, and they learn a lot of useful things like how to cook and bake using foods like mushrooms and wild fruits. So the kids can see the story right online. Some of you I know have Tumble Books, and I'd just like to point out that Tumble Books also has some other languages so that you can find the books. Here's a book on hockey that's in French, and those can be viewed online. I'm going to take a minute before we go into the resources to see if there are any questions. Yes, somebody says your Texas librarians can borrow any of the books. Most of the books that I mentioned are available in the Library Science Collection at the Texas State Library. Somebody said, yay, Melissa. Yes, she is in Colorado at Arapahoe Library District. And yes, I've given her blog. Storyblocks has videos in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese demonstrating songs and rhymes with early literacy tips. Thanks, Beth, for reminding me that. Let's see, is there anything else? I think those were the only questions. Oh. I mentioned a number of resources, and here are URLs for some of them. I didn't show you a page from Utah. State Library has a site called Bilingual Storytime for Gringos, and it has a lot of different ideas put together already for you that you can tailor for your own story times in Spanish. The Talk Story and Day by Day from South Carolina. Story Cove, the digital library, Tumble Books, and Chases are all there so that you've got those URLs. Also wanted to just point out a few other DIA resources for you. The ALSC, the Association for Library Services and Children, has a resource guide for DIA that's free online. Whether you're a member or not, you can get to it. The Texas Library Association put together a toolkit some years ago. It's still available online, although it has not been updated. Also, the State Library, Texas State Library's booklet is up there, and again, it's still available, although it has not been updated. Pat Mora's website has a lot of material, and she's constantly adding more. There's a really nice program guide there that she recently added to. ALSC also has a new family book club resource that they just put up online, as well as a lot of libraries are participating in STEAM program, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. I always have to make sure I can get that correct. And they've recently put up some book lists that have multicultural, multilingual books that relate to STEAM. This is the main page at ALSC for DIA, and you see that diversity in action there. And what I wanted to point out here is that in addition to the resources like the DIA Book Club, Family Book Club, which just won a major award from the United States Board on Books for Young People for its work and quality, there's also free program downloads, and this is also where you go to register your program. So that you can, every once in a while they've got a grant or something where they're able to give something to people who register. And also over on the left-hand side where I've circled, you can find a DIA event near you. When you register your program, it dumps into that database for the DIA programs. And I also like using it because it's a great way to get ideas for what other people are doing, and see get some ideas for yourself. I'm looking at the questions, and somebody pointed out STEM, S-T-E-M, was what they were calling things, and then they added the A for art. So STEAM includes the arts and to the technology stuff. But when you go to this, you can put in your zip code, or like if I put my zip code in, it's such a small town, almost nothing comes up. But you can also look at by state, that when you put a zip code in and it doesn't bring you up stuff, it also brings you to a page where you can look by state. And that's where we can see how many Texas libraries have registered. So we're watching you. This is what that page looks like. And so you can see right now for 2015, which is still 2.5 months off, there are not very many Texas libraries up there yet. So hopefully when we look again in a month or so, there will be a lot more. But when you click on the View Details link that's there, that tells you, that brings you to what that particular library or school is doing. These are some of the resources that are on that website. You've got your DIA Book Club Toolkit, you've got the resource guide, everything that you need to do a DIA program. You've got some posters that you can print out and personalize. And as with a lot of the organizations that work with DIA, it's also available in Spanish. And actually on Pat Mora's website, you can find how to say El Día de los Niños, El Día de los Libros in, I don't know, I think we were up to maybe about 30 languages, and they're always looking for more. So it's a good way to add to that if you want to be able to put Día de los Niños in some other languages. This is part of Pat Mora's website, and one of the things that I wanted to point out to you was that up in the top right you can see the bottom of the booklet that she has available for download, but also she has a song for Día de los Niños, and the words are there in English and in Spanish, as well as she has a YouTube video of kids singing it that you could also use with your Storytime groups. And then if you need more books, again, this is these should be available through the Texas State Library, Library Science Collection, Celebrating Cuentos, Promoting Latino Children's Literature and Literacy in Classrooms and Libraries. Also multicultural programs for teens and tweens and teens, which gives you some outlines for programs and specifics for programs in a number of different cultures. And then, of course, the book that you're getting. And somebody asked about how and when you'll receive the book. Christine will be telling you about that in just a moment so that we make sure that we get the information from everybody. Whatever you're doing, however you get started, the concept remains that libraries promote the power of books and reading, and these change lives for all children. What DIA is wanting to do is to add that emphasis of bicultural and multicultural and bilingual children. Jane Marino said, DIA provides children and families with ways to explore new worlds through reading and books. And those new worlds extend beyond Latin America and Mexico, and those worlds exist before and after April 30th. So any day and every day can be a great DIA. Whoops. Let me see whether there are any other questions. If you've got questions, go ahead and type them in. Oh, okay, somebody said, can we register if we don't have our program planned out completely? Yes, absolutely. You can put in that you're going to do it and what little bit you know, and that's great. The details, a lot of people you'll see don't have all the details ironed out. Some of us don't have them all ironed out until just a few days before, but let's see, any other questions? More details to, oh yes, more details to follow on the website. Yeah, when you register, I believe that there's a way you can either re-register when you have more details, or you can, add to it. Somebody asked, do programs have to be a certain size or reach a certain audience to be registered? No, not at all. You can register that you're going to do, and you'll see this when you go into that more details section and you look at what some of the other libraries are doing. And don't just look at Texas. Also, I might have pointed out, let me go back to that page. May not have it here to show you, but when you, this is just for 2015, there's actually a box where when you're looking, you can say what year you want. And so when I was doing the book, I actually went back several years looking at what different libraries had done for programs so that I could contact them and get more details. Also notice that you can select the language that you want to use, that you're looking for, so that a lot of times people will enter in there that they're doing something in German or they're doing something in Hindu. And if you're looking specifically for that kind of programming, you can look for the language. And I think there's a place in there where they ask you what languages you're going to be emphasizing. So even if it's going to be just, you know, hey, we're going to do a world language story time with books from a couple of different languages from the community, that's fine. You know, you may only be reaching 15 kids, but those are 15 kids that are getting a great experience. Any other questions? I've included my email address on here. In addition to Christine McNew at the Texas State Library, you're welcome to contact me if you've got a question about what we've covered today or about anything to do with your DIA programming. I've included Pat Mora's book, Book Fiesta, on this slide just as a reminder that it's in Arabic, and she was so thrilled to have it translated. Several other of her books have been translated into Asian languages, and you can find those on her website. But it's a lot of fun to see how the different writing is done and the beauty of all those different languages that we sometimes don't get to hear as much in our communities. But you know, every day is a new dia. Okay, Christine's going to give us a couple of other comments, and if you've got any more questions, I'm just going back through here to see if I missed anything.
I thank you, Jeanette. I think that you did answer all of the questions, so thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful ideas for celebrating DIA. And thank you to all of the librarians for attending. Now, Jeanette, and I believe Naomi too, mentioned that Texas librarians who attended today's live webinar may receive a copy of Jeanette's wonderful book, El Día de los Niños, El Día de los Libros, Building a Culture of Literacy in Your Community Through DIA. And you can order this book for your library's professional collection. So Texas librarians, you can order one copy per physical library location. Please follow the link that Naomi will post and enter your library's information and order your book. The link will only be available for about 24 hours, so don't delay in ordering your book. And also, please be sure to complete the exit survey. A link will pop up when you exit the webinar. And again, I want to thank Jeanette, and I want to thank all of you for attending today.
And I'll just add, please don't delay in requesting your copy of the book. It's from the American Library Association, and as we all know, those books are expensive. So it's great that the State Library is going to give everybody a copy for their professional collections at no charge to you. And I really appreciate the State Library doing that.
Well, you are welcome. And someone asked if this is only for Texas libraries, and yes, it's only for Texas libraries attending today's live webinar.
Yeah, unfortunately, the state looks askance at us buying books for other states.
So thank you again, and we really appreciate your attendance.